I remember there was this one section kind of close to the GTA where like I saw affordable like mobile homes, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, well, maybe like that's my path, like some of that. But when you did a little bit of research, you find out it was a nudist colony. And that was like the only.
So Zach, welcome to the channel. Thanks for joining me. I know you're no stranger to the camera, but I still appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah,
Um,
absolutely. Thanks for having me on, Conrad.
yeah, and so I mean, you've been like you were born and raised. You lived in Ontario your whole life, right?
Yeah, I've moved around the province, but yes, I was born and raised in Ontario. Yeah.
Right on. Okay. And so as of right now, you're not a homeowner. You're obviously renting right now. So like, tell me what the renting environment has been like for you so far.
Well, first off, it's really hard to find an apartment. When I was done school, I've had two apartments. So I've been out of school for 2 years, and in both those 2 years, I've had to find a new place to live because there's different things that are happening in the rental market that makes it hard to find a place long term. But also when something does become available, landlords often take that as an opportunity to raise the rent. So rent has
Right.
definitely been spiking out of control. I currently, right now, I'm very thankful. I do have a 2 bedroom apartment, and this is kind of like an office space. So I guess technically 3 bedrooms, maybe that, a small little kitchen, a living room, and it's just over 1,100 a month.
Which isn't too bad as far as rent's concerned.
That's considered cheap
Yeah.
around here. And like I have some friends that have like apartments that are 1 bedroom smaller than mine, and it's like 1,800 a month, or like paying like $1,200 a month to rent a room in a really nice house. Yeah, it's frustrating to hear people talk about it and just be okay with it and be like, oh, like
So
it is.
commonplace that, yeah.
The amount of times when you talk about housing with people in Ontario where they just say, it is what it is.
Right. Well, because it's funny. It was actually just on the news, CTV a couple of days ago. And they're like, how many people are contacting you right now, asking about like rent and mortgage payments and stuff? Because those are obviously on the rise. We assume people are asking you those questions. And I was like, it's about half. It's about half that are calling me right now saying, I can't afford life, right? Like, what do I do? How do I bring down my payments? How do I escape this rent reality? How do I, right? And we're seeing that nationally, like in all the clients that we have from all over. It's a very, very very, very common story. But I would agree that in Ontario and in BC, obviously it's the most egregious rents that are out there. They're the worst taken advantage of, in my opinion. They obviously would rather not have it, but they out of all the people we deal with across the country, people from Ontario and Vancouver seem to be like, it sucks, but it is what it is.
I've heard for a number of years now people just saying about that. And again, we'll get into it a little bit on, but like the idea of leaving Ontario doesn't come across a lot of people's minds, even though like it's sort of a like what if conversation, but I'll never do it.
Right. Yeah. Which I find interesting because I would say that if you were born into Ontario, you are more likely to not want to leave it. Whereas if you've moved into Ontario, you're like, oh, I can move elsewhere. I know elsewhere exists, and you seem more comfortable with the idea of moving. But there's a lot of people who are Ontario loyal. Even some of the YouTubers that are out in Ontario. I mean, there was one that was like talking about, well, Saskatchewan, Alberta as being like backwater countries that you'd have to be a fool to live in. And I'm like, you've never even been here. Like, how would you know? So like for you, like talk about your journey, because obviously you're moving, so that I know, right? But obviously the audience doesn't know yet. But you're
Yeah.
moving, and part of that is for the purposes of buying a house, right? So maybe talk a little bit about how that came about.
I'll start it, and thanks again for this opportunity to share it. I work just in the GTA kind of area, about an hour south of Toronto, kind of Hamilton area, and I was saving for a house. I in my mind I was like, whether it's in this area or somewhere else in Ontario, that was in my plan. I at the time was driving. I struggled each and every month, and I'm not someone that lives large. Like I was pretty frugal, um, and I was putting a little bit, like just as much as I could, even if it was like $100 a month towards a down payment. And like some months you can put a little bit more, other months not so much. But you're just whatever you can, you just kind of putting it away,
Chipping away.
chipping away at it. And I was driving this 2005 Toyota Sienna that was a beast. It had like over 450,000 kilometers on it, and it broke down. And I didn't like make payments on it or anything, and it was a great van to me. But I took it to a mechanic, and the mechanic quoted me a ridiculous amount of money to repair it. And I just got to this point where I'm like, all the money I had started to save up for a down payment would have needed to be on this van. So I finally was like, okay, you know what? I'm gonna get rid of the vehicle. And so and when you know, tip for anyone saving, if you are able, I know not everyone is able to, but if you can live life without a vehicle, that's a good way to save towards a down payment.
Mm-hmm.
And so I no longer had this van, and all of a sudden I had this new spending power, and it's not like a substantial amount of money, but like more than what I was able to before. And it just helped me start save a little bit more. And then I was doing a lot of research into mortgages and real estate, on your channel, on Bald Prairie Real Estate with Matthew, and like lots of other, great content on the YouTube platform. And I came to this realization that no one really knows what's going to happen with the real estate market. But there's this like hope for a lot of Ontarians that this drop is coming. Like in some extreme cases, they're like, oh, like it's going to tank like 50%. And I was educated enough to realize, whoa, if that happens, number one, I still wouldn't be able to afford a house like right away. Like I'm still couple of years away from doing that, even at like a 30% drop. And if that happened, it would create an entire new problem for the
Yep,
province, right?
for
And
sure.
I would talk to my friends and coworkers about like housing and things like that. And a lot of people would be like, well, yeah, like someone's got to do something. Maybe the government will do something. And I just got to this point of like fed up of like, I don't want to have to depend on hoping a historic crash happens or the government is going to do something to make home ownership more affordable in Ontario.
Yeah.
I just got to this place of like, okay, maybe there's something I could do to like move out of Ontario. And I did my research into different provinces and things like that. Part of my thing is I love my job. I didn't want to quit my job. And I kind of worked a hybrid remote position. And I was like, I wonder if the opportunity could come to make my job fully remote. It took, a couple of meetings, but eventually that got approved. And I was able to negotiate kind of a specific area. And for me, it was the East Coast. There's a lot more affordable housing out there. And all of a sudden, and this all happened like in the span of probably 3 months, where I was like, oh, like I can look to buy a home next summer. And so I'm still in that saving mode. I'm still, eating
Yeah.
super simply and living as, well within my means. But my goal is to, in June or July, actually buy a house somewhere in the East Coast. And it's been great, talking to you as my mortgage broker, and you've done a great job of helping me kind of learn about what it takes to actually get, pre-qualified and pre-approved for a mortgage, and learning that there's so many different types of mortgages
Right.
out there. And so I'm still on a journey. My journey is not complete yet. But yeah, in a nutshell, that's kind of what got me to this point. And I
And
encourage
we'll
it.
we'll definitely do a video in the future once you've like in a few
Yeah,
months from now, once you're a homeowner, and then we'll be like, so you did it, right?
absolutely. No, absolutely. I'm pumped about it. And I'm hoping that, everything goes smoothly. And yeah.
It's so, something you had said really, really interests me because obviously when you, produce online content and stuff like that, you get a ton of comments and stuff rather. And what you'll notice is that a lot of the comments that we get, and it's predominantly from people who are in Ontario, they have this proclivity to want the market to crash, like you said, but that it's like, it's going to happen at any moment. It's funny because with all the people I've ever known that have like studied, like the history of real estate prices and stuff like that. The crashes 20 to 30% is an incredible number. Like that like a housing market crash like that, like a true housing market crash, not a correction like some of the prices that we've seen right now that are coming off of a high, but a true correction is often really, really painful. And I think what a lot of people forget, or what a lot of people don't take into consideration, is if there's 100 houses, if there's 100 people rather, and there's only enough houses for the top 50, right? The top
Mhm.
50 people that are the richest are going to buy those houses naturally. They have a larger buying power. They're going to be able to come in and offer more money. So the top 50 get those 50 houses, and the bottom 50, well, you're stuck renting. And that's let's say that's the environment that we're in. It's probably more around the neighborhood of the top 67% will get it, but we'll say 50-50 for now. Well, if all of a sudden the markets came crashing down and housing prices completely plummeted, at the end of the day, there's still 100 people wanting to buy, and there's still 50 people who can buy 50 houses out there. So at the end, regardless of what that price is, still the top 50. If you were 55, like number 55 in that list, and only the top 50 are making it, doesn't matter if the prices are $1 million or 100,000, you're still not getting it because you're
Totally.
still in the bottom half,
Yep.
right? So until the answer becomes, hey, there's actually not 50 houses anymore. There's now 60. Well, now you're in that top bracket. 55 now qualifies because you're there's enough houses to satisfy, 60 people, right? Rather than 50. So like looking for a market crash to happen to suddenly make you a home buyer isn't going to produce the result you wanted. The only real solution is either less people buying houses, so reducing immigration, which isn't a popular opinion for a lot of people, or it's increasing the number of houses that exist, and
Yeah.
both of those things are government related. And like you said, it's not to be political; it just is what it is.
Take any political party, and they're probably not going to do a good job of
No,
increasing,
agreed.
increasing the
Yeah,
supply, right?
yeah.
And like I will say this. This is maybe something that for your viewers that aren't from Ontario is if you're walking in a large chunks of like the downtown core of Toronto or in Hamilton, you will see so many advertisements for borrowing from your RSVP
Hmm.
to like show you how to do it, because I know like that's an option for some people to get like your down payment, or rent to own programs are skyrocketing here.
Oh, I
and
believe it.
and from any like research I've done into a rent to own program, there maybe is a justification for some people, but for the majority of people, it's just keeping yourself in a working poor environment that might lead to home ownership to a house that you probably can't afford anyway.
Yeah.
So I
Well,
yeah.
Well, there are some good rent to own programs. I will
Mhm.
say
Yeah.
this. There are
Yeah.
some good ones. Just like there are some good real estate agents, just
Yeah.
like there are some good bankers, just like there are some good politicians. Um, it's not the some that are good that are the concern, it's the most that aren't. Like I said, there are some good rent to owns, but most programs, most of those rent to owns are not great contracts, and you better fully understand the thing that it is you're signing, like independent legal advice. But yeah, I think that's a sign of the time that people are looking for some way in. And honestly, down payments are tough. Like in Ontario, with the housing prices just being that much higher, how many of your friends, like, do you have friends that are home owners rather?
I have a few, and but like that's the thing is, even though like they were able to afford a home, they
Hmm.
don't do anything. They don't go on
Right,
trips.
right,
They,
right,
they don't like, and it's not that they don't want to. It's just like so much of your monthly income goes into this mortgage payment, along with all
right.
the other expenses that come with owning a house, that you just don't have the opportunity to have the quality of life that you really seek. And I just got to that point of, if I'm gonna have the dream of the quality of life that I want, and it's not one of luxury, but it is one of financial stability,
Hmm.
I had to come to the realization that homeownership in Ontario isn't a reality for me.
For you, yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah.
Like based on my skill set, my employment, home ownership in Ontario, if I were to do it, would be a bad financial decision.
Right. Which is a whole separate thought, right? Because people are like, "Oh, how do I become a homeowner?" But the real question then, but for you, which you answered, I think, like amazingly, is, do I want to be a homeowner in this province? Because even if you could get approved, is that really living where like most of your money goes towards a mortgage payment and you don't get to do anything,
Yeah.
like to me that's a miserable existence.
Yeah. When you're slave to your mortgage, right?
Yeah. Yeah, and like, and we talk about this all the time with like the clients that we end up having. Like, we say, hey, here's what you can get qualified for, here's what you can get approved for, but here's the price range that we think that you should stay under, right?
Hmm.
And it's usually lower, because the truth is that even now, even with all the tougher mortgage regulations, even with all the tougher and reduced pre-qualifications due to increased stress tests and stuff like that, um, the the truth is that while that's definitely helped reduce how much people qualify for, to make it at least a little bit more realistic, what hasn't been capped, which, like, because obviously pre-qualifications have been capped, what hasn't been capped is gas prices. What hasn't been capped is grocery bills. What hasn't been capped is the cost of entertainment, right? Like, literally everything has gone up, and I think that's what's pinching most people's wallets,
Totally.
right? On top of housing.
One other thing I will want to say, and again, this is for viewers that are not in Ontario. The other thing I've noticed that's on the rise, especially in the GTA and like kind of surrounding area, is the rise of mobile home parks and modular home parks.
Really?
Yeah. Oh yeah.
See,
Oh yeah.
that I hadn't heard. Like, I
Yeah.
follow the stats, and I didn't see that as an
Yeah.
indication.
And there's a lot of people that think that's the solution to like Ontario's market. But then the thing is, you're never going to own your land, right? You know, you might own a
Yeah.
home and still get a mortgage payment on it. But yeah, like I remember when I was looking for creative housing solutions here in Ontario, I had even called the guy and set up a video meeting with him about like what it looks like, and they sell you on it pretty good. They're pretty good at selling it, of saying like, oh, it's going to be a brand new modular home. If
Yeah,
we
yeah,
can
yeah.
qualify you for a mortgage for it, you get to pick out the paint, you get to pick out like how it's built and things like that. And yeah, so that's a big
So
thing
when
in
you
Ontario.
say when you say modular, do you mean modular or trailer park? Because sometimes those can be two different things.
Both.
Both, okay.
Yeah, yeah.
Because
I know.
modular just means that they stack it on top of each other, and sometimes they can make some pretty interesting buildings
So,
out of
so
it.
maybe I am mistaken then, because I'm talking about like there's a park, but it's not a mobile home, but it's a house that wouldn't have like a basement to it or anything like
Right.
that.
Yeah. So that's a type of modular. Like, there
Okay,
there are different types.
yeah, that's what I'm
But
referring to, because that's definitely
yeah,
on the rise.
interesting. And so, you talk about you're not owning your land, right? And that is obviously a big part of the value of a property, is the land
Mhm.
itself, having rights to that land. From a mortgage perspective, like how mortgage lenders see you, mortgage lenders see a mobile home, like a trailer park, for instance, is not well, and there's a reason for that. Because in the mortgage world, it's not considered an asset; it's considered a depreciating asset, is the term, right? Because mobile homes have like a shelf life of like 25 years to 35 years. Even the thing that you're living in is going to be considered useless and junk
Mhm.
within 35 years,
Yep.
right? So I sure hope people aren't doing that, because that is not the way out.
Well, that's definitely something that's on the rise, in Ontario, and over the next decade, we're going to see, the consequences, good or bad, to that.
Yeah.
I will just say, to keep it a little lighthearted, I do remember when I was still hopeful of home ownership in Ontario. I remember there was this one section kind of close to the GTA where like I saw affordable like mobile homes, and I was
Uh-huh.
like, oh, maybe like that's my path, like some of that. But when you did a little bit of research, you find out it was a nudist colony. Like and that was like the only
Hey,
thing I
Zach.
brought a lot of money.
Hey, don't knock it till you try it, buddy. Maybe that wasn't just your path to home ownership. Maybe you would have found love. Two problems with
Yeah,
one.
yeah. But I mean it, and like I joke around with my friends of like, oh yeah, the only place that's like affordable is the nudist colony that's close to the GTA.
Wow, and you can afford even higher rents there and higher mortgage payments because you don't have to pay for clothes.
Yeah,
That's,
and like
um,
I will say this: there are a number of people in Ontario that, because of generational wealth in their family, and I have lots of friends who immigrated to Canada, to this area, and their parents were able to gift them a large chunk of money towards
Yeah,
down payment, which again some might say is part of the problem, but it's part of the reality. And I don't like hold anything against anyone that has, you know, that blessing and that luxury to it. I just know in my own personal life, like I
that's
that's
not
not
you.
that's not me. That's not
Yeah. I love the way that you phrase that. So, like, the truth is, like, when I asked you, like, how did your friends become homeowners? I asked that because that's actually what I was alluding to was the gifted down payments from a lot of these parents and grandparents, and that's we're seeing that more commonly across the country, but it's been prevalent in Ontario and actually BC for quite some time, with these large gifted down payments coming from people who have already been in the home ownership game for quite some time, right? And so they've built all this equity up from rising house prices and everything else. And then of course they take some of that equity to help their kids enter the market. And it's almost become a class system in a way. But I love the way that you phrased it because you said it's a blessing, and truly it is. But that you're not going to hold it against them because there's so much bitterness towards it. It's like if you own a home, you should be taxed, you should be whatever, and it's like that's not a solution. Taking away from someone who has because you don't is not the solution, right? Like the solution is trying to make it so that more people have.
and with that, I will say that like there are organizations, and I don't mind shouting them out. There's a really good company called Indwell. I don't
Okay.
know if you've ever heard of them,
No.
but like they are fighting tooth and nail for affordable housing. They primarily go to, you know, people who are kind of, you know, like families that are struggling, like kind of in that. And the work that they do is really good work. However, you can't bank on them to solve, you know, the housing
Right.
crisis.
They're doing their part though.
Yeah, they're doing their part. And so
Yeah.
like there are organizations like that that are helping, and they probably don't get talked about enough within the real estate industry, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But it's definitely, you know, something that like if you are at a place where Ontario is you can't leave for family or for whatever reason, looking into an organization like Indwell is a good option.
Interesting. I'll have to check them out for sure.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
after I check them out and vet them, I'll make sure I put them in the description too, then so other people can find them.
Mhm.
Because I'm all for that, right? Like if there's people out there trying to solve the problem in their own way, right? Even I am. I've created some programs that try to help people bridge the gap from renting to into owning and stuff like that. Because at the end of the day, if I have a higher percentage of buyers or higher percentage of owners, rather, I actually think that's a good thing. I
Yeah.
want to see people, people who have immigrated here, build roots. I want to see them be able to raise their family and contribute to Canada as a nation and stuff like that. I take a lot of pride
Absolutely.
in the fact that Canada is so open in that respect. But to that end, though, I also want to make sure that the quality of life for everyone is good. If there's organizations, I'm all for shouting them out. That's great.
Yeah, and like I said, like the work that they do is very much a drop in the ocean of the problem
Yeah.
to it. But you know, it's something, right?
Well, there's that story with the one kid who was like racing along. There was a big storm and it had like thrown a bunch of starfish onto the beach. And so then the kid goes and he's going and he's throwing the starfish after starfish into the water. And someone came up and asked, and he's like, "What are you doing?" And he's like, "Well, I'm saving the starfish. If they stay on the beach, they're gonna die." And so he's sit there, picks up more, and he keeps throwing them in. And he's like, and the guy who's there on the beach is like, but there's millions of them. He's like, you can't save them all. He's like, so what does it matter? And then he picks up another one and he throws it in and he said, for that one, it matters.
Yeah,
Right. And so, yeah, you can't, we're not in the capacity to solve, at least not yet. We're not in the
yeah,
capacity to solve the nation's problems.
yeah.
But if we can at least solve a sliver of them or at least a portion of them, if everybody did that, I mean, how amazing, then we wouldn't have to rely on the government to do it either.
Totally, yeah. Which, you know, I'm the older I get, the more and more I'm
The more
love.
cynical.
Just the more I appreciate when the government isn't involved with my finances.
Yeah. Well, it's funny you say that because, when you're younger, you have this ideal that, oh man, the government can do things and you can change things. And then the older you get and the more experienced you become, the more you realize that it doesn't really matter who's sitting on the throne, who's sitting on the
Yeah,
chair with
yeah,
power, that they're all ineffective at something, not
Yeah.
everything, but like they all take their turns being ineffective at different things. And housing's been a problem for a long, long time.
And you know what? I think, Conrad, I'll say this. This is something that frustrates me to no end. When I hear a modern day politician talk about the housing crisis,
Hmm.
they talk about that the pandemic was the cause. We were in a crisis before, like housing was
Long before.
well before
Yeah.
2020. It frustrates myself and many other Ontarians when people talk about like, yeah, like the pandemic just drove housing, like it definitely accelerated a lot and
Yeah.
created some other issues that maybe weren't there at the same extreme. But like housing has been unaffordable in Ontario for a long time.
Yeah, there was a quote that I was looking at, and I had, man, I should actually find it again and put it on my channel. But it was housing prices have risen so much that someone with this really competitive salary can't qualify anymore. They're thinking of leaving. They're unable to provide food for their family. They're cutting out a lot of expenses and stuff like that. And then you find out the quotes from 1972.
Yeah.
Right. It's like everything that you're saying. It's like, oh wow, that's got to be a recent quote. No, it was like 50 years ago.
I, I'll share this. I do have a really close friend who, him and his wife both have good jobs. And by all accounts, you think home ownership for them should be realistic. One of them is a nurse, one of them is an
Hmm.
engineer. They have kind of come on board and they said, like, you know what? We might follow you out to the East Coast because,
Yeah, it makes sense.
yeah, just because even with decent wages, do you really want number one, do you want to put all of that effort and time into a large down payment into probably what's going to buy a fixer upper,
Yeah.
um, or do you want to have more fluidity with your money, right? Do you want to have more control over how you spend it, more financial freedom? And the reality is, if you live in Ontario or BC or these overpriced markets, that's an honest conversation you have to have with yourself and your loved ones.
Well, because the home can become a ball and chain. It can be a shackle in a lot of ways. Like we had a client buy a home out there about 8 months ago, and they just recently found out that they're going to have hundreds of thousands of dollars of repairs now from an
Yeah.
issue that they didn't even catch,
Yeah.
right? And all of a sudden, it's like, well, where do we get 250,000 from?
Yeah.
Good question. Where do you get 250,000 from?
I will share one other like headache story, and anyone watching from Ontario, put in the comments if you can face palm this. I had a friend who he's a carpenter. He and his business partner, they really wanted to do a house flip. They,
Okay.
they, they were like, you know what, we're doing it here in Ontario. The house was listed for $300,000. It needed new plumbing, new roof, new window, like everything.
Yeah.
It was an unlivable house. Like you could not buy this house for $300,000 and get excited about sleeping there the night you buy.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
They knew at the time the market was really hot. They were like, okay, we think we can put an offer in at 320. We can fix this up, and we think we could flip it and make a pretty decent profit on it. Take a guess. So the number one, they did not get the house. Take a guess at how much that house sold for.
So it was listed at 320.
It was listed at 300. They
300.
offered
Okay.
320.
Okay. What month was this?
This would have been in August of 2021.
320. I will go 440, 420.
You're a little short. It sold at 415.
Oh yeah, there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. I
Yeah.
figured it had to be over four because we had clients doing the same thing, buying just crazy, crazy, crazy stuff. Like we had one that listed. They were trying to buy a $1.1 million house out there. It wasn't Strathmore. It was in the GTA. Or it wasn't in the. It was just outside the GTA. So at 1.1, it's a nice house, like super nice house. And they put an offer in for like 1.2, and it sold for like 1.5. And they're like, "What do we do, Conrad?" I'm like, "You don't buy that."
Yeah.
Like I was like, that price doesn't make sense. That's
Yeah.
stupid.
Well,
So
that's the thing, right? Like my friend, he said he was all ticked. He's like, they paid that much over asking price for an unlivable house,
yeah,
right? Like,
but see once again, like Does that pass the sniff test? Is that actually a good buy? My thoughts are probably not, right? And sure enough, the market turned around and the house prices reduced, right? And kind of corrected, not corrected, but adjusted for where they probably should have been more at. And all of a sudden, it's like the house wasn't even worth close to 1.5, right? Like
Yeah,
it's like, what were you thinking?
totally.
Yeah. Well, I appreciate you taking the time out of your day for
Yeah, thanks
this.
for having me. This was fun.
We're definitely going to follow up with you in maybe several months and see how the home ownership journey went. But we wish you
Absolutely.
luck with the saving. We wish you luck with the move, and yeah, enjoy being a house owner when it does come true.
Can't wait.
Right on, man. Ciao.